Following President Sisi's directives, Egypt sends 4 military planes with food aid to Gaza. Canada announces it will recognize the State of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September 2025. Lebanon's President Aoun urges Hezbollah and all armed groups to hand over their weapons to the Lebanese army.
والله العظيم ولا حبة رز، والله العظيم ولا حبة عدس. ما فيش أكل، ما فيش شرب، عندي بنت 2.5 صارت تشطب.
Following directives from Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Egypt has dispatched 4 military transport aircraft loaded with tons of food aid to Gaza. The airdrops target areas inaccessible by land, aiming to ease the severe shortages faced by Palestinian residents amid the ongoing crisis. This initiative complements Egypt's continued land-based aid delivery and reflects Cairo's role in coordinating international efforts to support Gaza. Since the crisis began, Egypt has provided about 80% of the total humanitarian assistance entering the Strip, working closely with friendly nations to alleviate suffering. France's Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has condemned the U.S. and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, saying its militarized aid distribution system has led to a bloodbath among civilians. And speaking after talks in Nicosia, Barrot described the situation as a scandal and urged the immediate cessation of the foundation's activities, citing the deadly chaos at aid distribution points in Gaza. His remarks come amid growing international criticism of the humanitarian toll in the besieged enclave. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced Canada's intention to recognize the State of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September 2025. Carney emphasized Canada's steadfast support for Israel's right to exist in peace and security, stressing that a viable Palestinian state recognizing Israel is essential for a lasting peace. Highlighting the erosion of the two-state solution, Carney called for the coordinated international action to restore hope for peaceful coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. He noted the essential role of the United States and Canada's commitment to partnering for peace in the region.
To hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state. Canada will increase its efforts in supporting strong democratic governance in Palestine and the contributions of its people to a more peaceful and hopeful.
U.S. President Donald Trump has warned that Canada's plan to recognize a Palestinian state could jeopardize ongoing trade negotiations between the two countries. Posting on his Truth Social platform, Trump said it would be very hard to finalize a trade deal with Canada if Prime Minister Mark Carney proceeds with the recognition at the UN General Assembly in September. The Trump administration has already announced its intent to impose a 35% tariff on a range of Canadian goods starting Friday if a new agreement is not reached. The warning adds a sharp geopolitical twist to already tense economic talks. And Israel has sharply rejected Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney's announcement to recognize a Palestinian state, calling the move a reward for Hamas. In a statement posted, Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the Canadian government's shift undermines efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and to establish a framework for the release of detainees. The rejection highlights tensions between Canada's evolving Middle East policy and Israel's security concerns amid ongoing conflict. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Vershinin has stated that Russia's recognition of the State of Palestine helps preserve the possibility of a two-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. He noted that Russia has maintained strong relations with Palestine since the opening of its embassy in Moscow in 1990. Vershinin emphasized that a two-state solution remains the most reliable path to peace and urged an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, highlighting ongoing discussions with international partners, including the UN. He described stopping the bloodshed in Gaza and alleviating civilian suffering as urgent priorities in achieving lasting peace. And China's ambassador to Palestine has voiced strong support for a two-state solution and an urgent ceasefire in Gaza, calling for international pressure to end the humanitarian crisis. At a press conference in Ramallah, he urged Israel to restore aid access and meet his obligations under international law. China, he said, rejects settlement expansion and any attempt to change Gaza's status by force, backing the Arab plan for Gaza's governance and the Palestinian Authority's role in both Gaza and the West Bank. Beijing also pledged continued aid, training, and support for Palestinian unity and reconstruction efforts. And Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful has called for the immediate launch of negotiations towards a two-state solution, emphasizing that recognition of a Palestinian state should come as the outcome of such a process and not the starting point. In a statement released before his trip to Israel and the Palestinian territories, Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful emphasized that a negotiated two-state solution is the only viable path to ensure peace, security, and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians. He also made clear that Germany would oppose any unilateral actions that sideline negotiations, underscoring the urgency of launching a credible peace process. Kenya's representative has warned that a lack of decisive action and entrenched positions risk prolonged humanitarian suffering and regional instability. He stressed the importance of the current conference as a critical chance to take irreversible steps towards peace. Calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and unhindered humanitarian access, he advocated for strong, jointly monitored security arrangements protecting civilians on both sides, tied to benchmarks supporting a two-state solution. He proposed creating a multinational oversight body to ensure compliance and transparency, emphasizing that the world is watching and peace must rest on political, economic, and security foundations. And Malaysia has called for an immediate stop to arms supplies to Israel and has banned Israeli-flagged ships from its ports. The representative condemned Israel's efforts to undermine the UN and stressed protecting the UN agencies like the UNRWA. He demanded unimpeded humanitarian access and condemned the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation for causing nearly 1,000 Palestinian deaths among aid seekers. And Belize's UN representative has stressed that recognizing Palestine is just the first step towards peace. He urged the global community to help build Palestinian institutions capable of governing a democratic state alongside Israel. Calling attention to Gaza's worsening humanitarian crisis, he demanded unrestricted aid flow and international support for reconstruction. He emphasized that real progress requires a credible political process and called on Israel to return to negotiations, stating that restoring confidence must begin with an end to violence. And Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has affirmed support for a two-state solution and called for a Gaza ceasefire and faster aid delivery. Treasurer Jim Chalmers said Australia will recognize Palestine, though no timeline is set. France, Britain, Canada, Malta and others plan to recognize Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September. 15 countries issued a joint call for a ceasefire, detainee release and humanitarian access, reaffirming commitment to peaceful coexistence between Israel and Palestine. And U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Hamas to surrender and release detainees, stating it was the fastest way to end the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. His remarks, posted on Truth Social, come as U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff heads to Israel to revive stalled ceasefire negotiations and address worsening conditions in the enclave. Famine warnings persist as indirect talks between Israel and Hamas recently collapsed in Doha, with both sides blaming each other for the deadlock. And the U.S. Senate has rejected 2 resolutions aimed at halting arms sales to Israel, despite mounting concerns over civilian casualties and humanitarian conditions in Gaza. The resolutions, introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders, failed with votes of 73-24 and 70-27. All support came from Democrats, while Republicans, including President Donald Trump's allies, uniformly opposed the measures. Sanders expressed optimism despite the outcome, noting growing Democratic support and suggesting a shift in public sentiment. He said the American people are increasingly unwilling to fund military support for actions contributing to the suffering in Gaza, and voiced hope for eventual bipartisan backing. And Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has called on the European Union to suspend the trade component of its association agreement with Israel. Kristersson announced the demand on social media, stating that Israel is failing to fulfill its most basic obligations regarding emergency aid access. He described the situation in Gaza as absolutely appalling and urged the Israeli government to allow unhindered humanitarian aid into the territory. And the death toll in Gaza has risen sharply, with at least 111 Palestinians, 91 of them aid seekers, killed in the past 24 hours alone. An additional 820 people were injured in Israeli attacks across the enclave. Since Israel's military campaign began on October the 7th, 2023, a total of 60,249 Palestinians have been killed and 147,089 wounded. The number of aid seekers killed since May 27th, when Israel implemented a new aid distribution system, has now reached 1,330, with more than 8,818 others injured in the process.
المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
And Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun has called on Hezbollah and other armed groups to hand over their weapons exclusively to the Lebanese army. Aoun stressed the need for the state to assert full control over all Lebanese territory. He highlighted the importance of Israel withdrawing to internationally recognized borders, the release of detainees, and securing $1 billion annually for the army over the next decade. Hezbollah, however, has resisted disarmament demands, complicating Lebanon's security landscape. Lebanon's Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem has firmly rejected demands for the group to disarm, saying such calls serve Israel's interests rather than Lebanon's security. Qassem criticized the U.S. for insisting on the removal of Hezbollah's missiles, drones, and other weapons, accusing the American envoy Thomas Barrack of advocating disarmament to benefit Israel. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark Summers in our newsroom. Mark.
Thank you, Selma. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, we're now joined from Beirut by the political science professor and writer, Michelle Shemai. Hello and welcome to Q News. Thanks for being there with us. So what do you think of the president's calls, the Lebanese president's calls, for the necessity of the state being the only entity that should bear arms?
Hello, thank you for having me. The president of Lebanon, what he said, this is actually the voice of the Lebanese people. It is the voice of more than 80% of Lebanese people who are very eager to build a sovereign state without, they want a free state on all the borders. And so what the president is saying is actually what the Lebanese are saying, and it is his personal opinion. Also, he said that in the Pledge of Alliance, when he said that when he became president, and so according to that, the president is aiming to live up to his promises. But the main problem here is, will the president be able to achieve what he wants, achieve his dreams, or will he be disappointed because of Hezbollah's refusal, their absolute refusal of the disarmament thing, and of the state being the sole bearer of the weapons?
Yes. Is it achievable then in that case? Of course, we have the Secretary General, Naim Qassem, of course, saying from Hezbollah, saying no and rejecting what the president says. So is it achievable at all, do you think?
That Tuesday morning will be in the meeting, the conference will say how we're going to deal with these groups, and that Lebanon would be the sole legitimate bearer of the arms, and so the Lebanese military and other entities also that are involved, they will have an opinion. And I think also that he will put a timetable, maybe it won't exceed 4 months, but the actual problem and the main problem is how we are going to do that. Up till now, the statements that that Hezbollah's Secretary General has said, all of them actually they are indicating that the country won't be able to do that, because today they're threatening to create another problem like what happened on in 2008, and Naim said that in 2026 the conference will be the same one that happened in 2008, that was followed by a coup. And so this problem that they are, the threat that they're giving today, I don't think actually they will be able to achieve that. They will not live up to threats. It is just, they are just trying to make the Lebanese people afraid and to pressure the government and the president to let them have the weapons and not to put the what they want in action, which will make the state more safe.
So if you say it's the president's wish and it's what he wanted for the state to be the only one carrying the weapons, it's what he was when he became president, it's what he said at the time, and you say it's the wish of the Lebanese people, what pressure could be put on Hezbollah to disarm?
Economically, things will not be right unless there will be, political and secure stability, and this will not happen in Lebanon unless unless everything between Hezbollah and the state is actually solved and there is a solution. And so after that, the government will be able to start the reformation, the economic reformation and the monetary reformation as well, which will enhance the trust of the Arab and the international trust in Lebanon, and then we will start getting money. There will be investments, and we will be given money to reform after the war that was done by Israel. But if the state, if it can't get the trust and to get the stability back and to be a sovereign state on the whole area of Lebanon, so then they will not be able to reach that economic reformation, and there will not be money to reform Lebanon again. And we have to realize a very, very, very important issue is that the economic reformation request is, for us as Lebanese people, we want to solve the entanglement with Hezbollah, and we want to have Lebanon again on the international monetary system and stop what's happening in Lebanon, which made Lebanon's reputation look bad and had us put on the very down in the list. And so the threat that they're talking about, putting Lebanon on the economic blacklist, which is very, very clear that Lebanon then will be destroyed economically.
Well, we'll continue to watch the economic situation in Lebanon very closely. We wish you the best. Michelle Shemai, thank you very much for joining us, political science professor, joining us from Beirut. Thank you very much. And we'll go back to you now, Selma, in the studio.
Thank you, Mark. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has met the Syrian counterpart Assad Shibani in Moscow to discuss ongoing cooperation. They agreed to regularly inspect all agreements between the two countries and covering security and personnel training for both civilian and military sectors. Lavrov expressed hope that Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, who replaced longtime ally Bashar al-Assad in December, would attend an upcoming Russia-Arab summit in Moscow this October. Shibani emphasized Damascus's desire for Moscow's continued support in rebuilding a united Syria.
Всех имеющихся соглашений. Эта тема уже затрагивалась, какие-то контакты были, но...
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has announced that he had approved key principles for major arms agreements with the United States. He described the agreements as large-scale and expressed hope that they would be fully implemented, which he believes will strengthen both Ukraine and the U.S. along with their allies. Zelensky, who praised the U.S. government's efforts to pressure Russia towards peace, highlighting that sanctions and international pressure are essential to limiting Moscow's resources for the war. He mentioned ongoing preparations for further discussions with global partners aimed at strengthening Ukraine's position.
союзників, наших партнерів. Цінуємо принципові кроки Америки для тиску на Росію заради миру. Саме зараз треба діяти, щоб примушувати Росію до миру. Так, Москва хоче воювати і далі, але це питання у потенціалі.
Ukraine's parliament has voted unanimously to restore the independence of two key anti-corruption agencies, aiming to calm the country's most serious political crisis since the war in Russia. The bill, submitted by President Vladimir Zelensky, passed with a 331-0 vote after growing pressure from civil society and European leaders. Protesters gathered outside Parliament demanding swift action. Cheers erupted as the vote was streamed live and the bill passed. The measure now awaits Zelensky's signature, marking a critical step in Ukraine's effort to uphold democratic reforms and maintain Western support. And Russia has announced it had seized control of Chasiv Yar, a strategic town in eastern Ukraine, following nearly 16 months of intense combat. The town's capture would pave the way for further advances in the Donetsk region. The Russian Defense Ministry said its forces had liberated the town. Ukraine has not officially responded to the claim. And Russia has launched a massive drone and missile attack on Kiev, killing at least 8 people, including a 6-year-old boy, and injuring 88. Explosions rocked the city overnight as emergency crews searched for survivors. President Vladimir Zelensky condemned the attacks, saying peace without strength is impossible. Kiev's mayor reported 9 children wounded, and the highest in a single night since the war began. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a new health initiative aimed at improving digital medical records, partnering with companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, and OpenAI. The plan focuses on seamless information sharing between patients and healthcare providers and giving patients greater access to their own medical records. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services supports the initiative, emphasizing interoperability to enhance communication across the healthcare system.
A reality. Secretary Scott Bessent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for joining us. For decades, America's healthcare.
And Lithuania's Prime Minister Gintautas Paluckas has announced his resignation following pressure from a junior coalition party. The Social Democrat leader faced calls to step down over business connections to a company owned by his sister-in-law. The junior party had threatened to leave the ruling coalition unless Paluckas resigned, prompting his decision to step aside. An F-35 fighter jet crashed near Naval Air Station Lemoore in Central California. The U.S. Navy confirmed the pilot successfully ejected and is safe, with no other personnel affected. The cause of the crash remains under investigation, and Lockheed Martin, the jet's manufacturer, had no immediate comment. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin, and here's what we have been covering. Following President Sisi's directives, Egypt sends 4 military planes with food aid to Gaza. And Canada announces it will recognize the State of Palestine at the UN General Assembly in September 2025. Lebanon's President Aoun urges Hezbollah and all armed groups to hand over their weapons to the Lebanese army. And this concludes our news bulletin for the hour. And don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.